Hey, everybody, welcome. This is Marnie. I am here today with Kathy Carlton Willis. She's one of our speakers over at womenspeakers.com. And she also has a new book out called The Grin Gal's Guide to Trials, 7 Trials Every Woman Must Face. And I'm excited to have you here. Welcome, Kathy.
Thanks. I'm excited to be here too. And it's silly to talk about trials during Christmas month, but I think we all are dealing with quite a few trials, right?
Well, I mean, even just the holidays, we flew to Minnesota on a Thursday and on Friday for Thanksgiving. And on Friday, the governor shut down Minnesota and said, you're not even supposed to have your family members come in. And we're like, well, we're here now. So, I mean, it is challenging. Even during this holiday season, a lot of you are dealing with, you're not going to be able to see your mom or your dad because they're behind a wall and you can wave at them, but not get close. And it is just, it's been a really banner tough year.
It has been. And, I wrote this book during this banner hard year. And so I think in some ways it comforted me before it's even released to help comfort other people. So I think I needed it too.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Before we came on, I said, I asked you if you've been through all 7 trials yourself, and you said, yes, you had.
Yeah, it's funny because part of the title is Every Woman Faces. And so it is common to all of us. And when we get into them, we'll see, oh, yeah, I have been through that. A really bad year is when you've been through all 7 in the same year.
It's one of those stress tests, if you've been through all 7, your stress is way up here. That's so funny. Yeah. And I think that's what's really cool is that the chapters in the book, and this is set up to be, you can do it by yourself or with a group. It's set up to be a Bible study kind of a book, a resource. And the chapters go along with the family tree theme, which we won't get into here too much today, but it's family album, family Bible, family recipes, legacy, and chat. So I think I'd like to just dive into the first trial. And we're not going to spend so much time on the trial itself, but more on the great God who carries us through each of these trials and maybe how to think about them differently. Mm-hmm. So the first trial, and I'm curious why you put it first, when I'm doubted.
Well, all of these are based on the trials that Job went through. And you see just the way he was misunderstood by his wife and his friends. And they doubted him. They doubted when he said he was not necessarily sinless, but he had made recompense for all of his sins. He was right with God. Yeah. And so they doubted him. And I think all of us have that same foundation of when we feel like others aren't understanding us, aren't getting us, and it really will tie into some of the others where it makes us feel alone. It makes us feel disrespected. So it goes into the others. So yeah, it had to be first.
So when you say when I'm doubted, what do you think, like a woman, where's that going to most often happen?
Well, a lot of times others make the wrong assumptions about us. And it's just so hard because if we try to clear the air, we sound defensive. But if we stand up for ourselves too much, we're too brassy. And so it's hard to find that balance when others are misunderstanding or doubting us. And we just have to stand up for what is truth and let truth be the thing that shines through us, because God will use that to help people finally at some point see the truth. And if they aren't seeing it, it's because they have blinders on. It's not because we're not living out that truth like he wants us to.
Yeah, that's really, really good. The second one is when I'm disrespected.
Yeah, that's hard because that's when it goes to the next step where there's been false allegations about you and people say wrong things about you. And one of the times that I found that most in my life was when the wife of my boss accused me of having an affair with her husband and made false allegations. And I felt, number one, that's just so not my character, and it was so not true. But it was just so hard to live through that and know when to defend and when to let my reputation stand on its own, So all of us, we're not always going to have that exact trial, but it's so hard when we're disrespected because it's just not who we are. And we want people to love us for who we are.
Absolutely. Both of these are bringing to mind the story in Exodus where they've got the Egyptians coming and God says, stand still and watch that I will fight for you. And whether you're doubted or disrespected, in those situations, like you said, a lot of times trying to defend yourself actually isn't helpful in the end. And a lot of times the right response there is to just stand down and let God defend you. I remember a story, someone very close to me who had been called in and falsely accused at work, just raked over the coals. And she said the whole time she was standing there, she just kept saying, you have to defend me, God, you have to defend me. You defend me. You defend me. And it took the conversation and the outcome a totally different way than if she had tried to defend herself.
That's right. And when I think about the times Jesus stood up for what was truth, he only did it when others were involved, when they were falsely accused, and he'll do that for us. But when he was falsely accused, he let his truth stand for him. He did not defend himself. He just stood there and took it. And so there's times that we have to follow his example and let him be the one that defends us.
Wow. And he was willing to go even to death for us, not defending himself. Yeah, it's pretty amazing. It's pretty amazing. Number 3 is when you're deserted.
And that one, I am hearing more and more people, especially this year, feeling all alone. Or if they aren't feeling that loneliness, they're feeling invisible and not heard. And one of the things, the core values that we need to have in relationships is letting people know, I see you, I hear you, because they're feeling deserted. And so this really hit home with me as I started writing it and seeing the Bible verses that went along with that and how we can encourage other people. And that's part of this book. It's not just to help us heal and have self-help from it through God's word, but then to see those same trials in other people and be there for them.
Desertion can come in so many ways. You can still have someone there with you, but because their heart isn't with you, you feel deserted.
That is so true. You don't have to be alone to feel lonely, and you don't have to have silence to be unheard.
Yeah. A 4th one is when I'm deceived.
Okay, so let's just get real for a minute. This was the hardest one to write. And the reason why is I took it in 2 really bold places. One is the fact of spiritual abuse that goes on, spiritual abuse at church, whether it's through a lay leader or a church pastor or staff person. It goes on in homes. I used to work with domestic violence agencies, and a lot of times the abusive spouse was a respected church member, and yet at home he was using the Bible almost as a bully whip to abuse the spouse. And so I decided it was really important because Job was quoted from these religious leaders, things that sounded so close to the truth in the Bible, so close. And I even hear people using some of those quotes, and it's like, you have to realize who said that and have
this wasn't in good context.
In the Bible, maybe it was a falsehood, and God used it to show us we need to have discernment when that happens. And so this chapter was the hardest to write because there's a lot of resistance when it comes to deception and people that are taking us just one little inch away from God's truth, and it sounds so close to it. And so my prayer for everyone listening is that they would allow the Holy Spirit to give them discernment when it comes to this, so that they're not deceived and that they can help people coming out of a spiritually abusive situation.
Deception, this has been a tough one for me in my life. Just God has worked on me a lot with this. And what I came to understand was that deception is always truth, just perverted. Just you've got this true statement. So it sounds so right, but it's just like you said, just a little off. And so it just takes you have to have some discernment there to identify when you're being really lied to, when this is, and I think a lot, the enemy will come and put seeds of deception in our heads. Like it's so close to the truth, but it's a lie.
Right. And there are so many books out there that are just like that. And it's easy to get on the bandwagon and really like that author and read everything that they write, but maybe it is just one bubble off from the truth and could lead us down a dangerous path. You know, I think about carnival mirrors, that you go through that section where you're supposed to just be seeing a reflection of you, but instead it's really wonky. And that's what deception is, you know. It's supposed to be the truth, it's supposed to be the image, but it's just off. And we need to be able to recognize that.
Yeah. And just a close walk with Christ there is so helpful. And then just the confidence to know that at the right time, in the right way, he will reveal truth. And sometimes it is hidden for a season, for a reason. The truth is hidden there. I just had something last week that all of a sudden I realized, oh my goodness, I have been being deceived here about this particular thing. But I didn't have any sense of that God had failed me in that. I just had a realization that now was the time for me to have seen it.
Good. That's good. And it came to a culmination because then you were equipped to deal with it.
Right. I was right. So that's kind of what I'm thinking about, is that God brings us to the point where we're ready and able to handle receiving the truth.
Right.
And not that anybody should ever deceive us. In heaven, nobody will be deceiving us. But here on earth, it's just not heaven yet.
It's not heaven yet. You're exactly right. And, you know, abusers are so tricky because it's just like domestic violence, where there's a cycle. And so you begin to trust that person, and they're very charismatic usually in the way that they're believable, and they're loving, and you want to respond in kind. And so it makes it really hard when you see, oh, wait a minute, this is a danger zone, and ask God to give you that red flag so that you see it.
Yes, right. And then so you know that you can just always run to Jesus for truth. I like it that the Bible describes Jesus as the truth. He doesn't only know the truth, he is the truth. So the right answer is always run into Jesus. How about when I'm disappointed?
You know, one of my favorite talks that I get asked to speak on is expectations, unmet and unrealistic expectations. And we have them in ourselves. We have them in other people. They have them in us. And if we're honest, we even have them in God. And so this chapter deals with all of those expectations and how we can manage them so that we can deal with life in a better way, so that we have the attitude we need to have that joy that we're looking for.
I remember I used this word a lot for most of my life, I think, until I was in my probably late 30s. And one day I had said to one of my kids, I said, I'm just so disappointed. And they burst into tears and went away. And I asked God about it. I'm like, why is this? I mean, I was disappointed, you know, why couldn't I say that I was disappointed? And he just taught me that my hope was to be in him alone.
Oh, that's good.
I know. And that no one else's shoulders were broad enough to bear my disappointment, especially my children, but nobody really was built to bear the burden of my hopes deferred. And so just to run that disappointment to him, and that's been it's just been a huge gift to me to not have to experience so much disappointment, because disappointment comes. And so what do we do with it? My hope is in the Lord. Yeah, I just love that one. Number 6 is when I'm disabled.
Yeah, and you know what? I hated using the word disabled because most disabled people don't like to be labeled that. I have been chronically ill since my late 20s. And so I write this from a position of having lived a lot of awful things, over 20 surgeries, and I don't know how many medications and things like that. And so that's been really hard, but I was following my D pattern. All of these 7 trials start with the letter D, and we really are disabled. So for those who aren't dealing with pain or chronic health, I guarantee you have someone in your life who is. And so this chapter also deals with things like what to say, what not to say, practical tips for how you can help them and be there for them, because it's not like the flu or a pregnancy, you know, where you take over a casserole or you offer to do something and then they're better in 6 weeks. It's a long, ongoing thing. And so just like Job dealt with the pain that he had, and people didn't quite know how, they did come. I have to give his friends props. They did go to him. So they did the first thing really well because they dropped what they were doing and they went to him to console him. And they sat with him for days in silence, allowing that grief to happen. But then when they spoke up, then they said all the wrong things. And that's what happened. So I was pretty open in this chapter of how it feels when people give us advice and maybe tell us medical things thinking we haven't tried it already, or maybe it just makes us feel stupid when people tell us how to fix us. And some things aren't going to be fixed. And God's grace is enough to get us through the things that aren't fixable. And that's okay too. I'd rather be, God told me once when I asked for healing that he was going to use me broken. And ever since then, I realized that's okay with me. I don't care if my healing doesn't come until heaven, because if he's using me, that's the best thing of all.
Right, right. Kathy, it's been so great to have you here. You are a writer and speaker with a balance of funny and faith, whimsy and wisdom. You guys can learn more about Kathy over at kathycarltonwillis.com or womenspeakers.com. Kathy, I only have 6 of these here. I don't have the 7th. Do you remember what we missed?
Yes, it was when I'm destitute. And that's when you lose a job or your finances or you lose your home. And it's a different kind of grief, but you really go through the same stages of grief. And when I told my launch team my next book would be on these 7 trials, I said, pray for me, because that means God's equipping me by me going through them all. Right. Even though I'd already been through them before, I knew that during the writing of it, I would go through them. Within days, my husband lost his job. Within days of that. And so there's wisdom through that insight and discernment and prayer. And so I lived it all over again this year. You don't want to lose a job during the pandemic, that's for sure. So find a new one. But he did. That's the rest of the story. He did. And then we moved and I lost my forever home and we went through all that. So
during a hurricane.
While they're evacuating, I'm moving. That is not a smart move, but poor planning. But anyway, those of you out there who have gone through a loss this year, and it could be anything, but we grieve it just like we do when someone passes away. And we need to be okay with that.
Well, I'm just so excited that you've written this book, and you guys want to definitely check it out. Do it personally, or do it with your daughter's long distance or your friend's long distance, or do it in a group that you're socially distanced in, either online or on premise, and just really dig into the truth that God has for us here, that he is enough. He is more than enough. Kathy, thank you so much.
Thank you. It's been great to be with you.
It's been fun to have you here. And thanks, you guys. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.